The gunshot ripped through Josephine's chest before she could scream. Her knees hit frozen ground, blood spreading dark and fast across white snow. Vernon's boots crunched closer, and she looked up at the man she'd married, the man who'd promised to love her, expecting mercy. Instead, he holstered his gun and turned his back. "You're more trouble than you're worth." His voice disappeared into the blizzard as he rode away, leaving her to bleed out in the Utah wasteland. 22 years old, and Josephine Blackwell was dying alone, abandoned by the only person she'd ever trusted. Before we continue with Josephine's story, I want to ask you something. If this story moves you, please subscribe to our channel and stay with us until the very end. Comment below with the city you're watching from so I can see how far these stories have traveled. Now let's go back to that frozen moment where everything changed. The pain came first, sharp burning, impossible. Then, the cold seeping through every bone, every breath. Josephine's eyes wouldn't open. Her body wouldn't move. Somewhere in the distance, through the howling wind, she heard hoofbeats. Then nothing. "Easy now. I've got you." The voice was rough, urgent. Strong arms lifted her from the snow. She tried to speak, but her lips wouldn't form words. "Don't try to talk. Save your strength." The man, whoever he was, wrapped something warm around her body. A coat. His coat. She felt herself being lifted onto a horse, felt his arm around her waist, holding her against his chest, as the animal pushed forward through the blizzard. "Stay with me," he said. "Just stay with me." But Josephine was already slipping away again. When consciousness returned, it came in fragments. A ceiling, wooden beams, the crackle of a fire. Pain, God, the pain was everywhere, centered in her chest, where Vernon's bullet had torn through her. "You're awake." Josephine's head turned toward the voice. A man sat beside the bed, tall, weathered, with dark hair, and eyes that held something she couldn't name. Kindness, maybe, or pity. "Who?" Her voice came out as a rasp. "Ethan Yates. You're at my ranch about 6 miles west of Silver Reef." He reached for a cup on the bedside table. "Here, small sips." Water touched her lips. She drank, then coughed, pain exploding through her chest. "Easy," Ethan said. "The bullet went clean through, but you lost a lot of blood. You've been unconscious for 2 days." 2 days. Vernon had shot her 2 days ago. Left her to die in the snow like an animal. "My husband." "I don't know anything about a husband." Ethan's voice was careful. "I found you alone in the blizzard, half dead. That's all I know." Josephine closed her eyes. Tears leaked from the corners, hot against her frozen skin. "He shot me," she whispered. "He said I was more trouble than I was worth, and he shot me." Ethan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was harder. "Then your husband is a coward and a murderer, and you're safe here. Do you understand? You're safe. Safe." The word felt foreign, impossible. "Why did you help me?" she asked. "You don't know me." "Didn't need to know you were dying." Such simple words. Such an impossible kindness. The first week passed in a blur of pain and fever. Ethan tended to her wound twice daily, changing the bandages with careful, practiced hands. He cooked simple meals, broth, bread, eggs, and fed her when she was too weak to lift the spoon herself. He never asked questions, never pushed. He simply took care of her the way a man might care for an injured calf or a sick horse. Practical, necessary. But there was something else in it too. Something Josephine couldn't quite identify. On the 8th day, she managed to sit up on her own. "That's good progress," Ethan said, helping her adjust the pillows. "Pain still bad. It's manageable." She watched him move around the small cabin, stoking the fire, checking the coffee pot. "You live here alone?" "I do. No wife, no family." His shoulders tensed slightly. "Not anymore." The words hung in the air between them. Josephine didn't press. She understood that kind of pain, the kind that didn't want to be spoken aloud. "I'm sorry," she said instead. "Nothing to be sorry for. Ethan poured coffee into 2 tin cups. You want some? Might be too strong if you're not used to it. I'll try it. He brought her a cup, and she wrapped her hands around the warm metal. The coffee was indeed strong, bitter, and dark, but it felt like life flowing back into her veins. How long have you been out here? She asked. Built this place 5 years ago. Bought the land from a rancher moving back east. He sat down in the chair beside the bed. It's not much, but it's mine. It's more than I have. Ethan looked at her, then really looked at her, and something shifted in his expression. You can stay as long as you need to. I mean that. You don't even know me, Josephine said. I could be anyone. A thief. A liar. Could be, he agreed. But I don't think you are. How can you be sure? I can't. He took a sip of his coffee. But I'm willing to take the chance. By the second week, Josephine could walk short distances, though her chest still ached with every breath. Ethan had given her some of his sister's old clothes dresses that hung loose on her thin frame, but were warmer than anything she'd owned with Vernon. She started helping with small tasks, washing dishes, folding laundry, anything to feel less like a burden, less like the helpless woman Ethan had pulled from the snow. One afternoon, as she was sweeping the cabin floor, Ethan came in from feeding the horses. You don't have to do that, he said. I want to. I need to feel useful. You're recovering from a gunshot wound. That's enough for now. Josephine set down the broom. I can't just lie in bed all day. I'll go crazy. Ethan pulled off his gloves, considering her. All right, but if you start hurting, you stop. No pushing through it. I promise. They fell into an easy rhythm after that. Ethan taught her how to make bread, his hands guiding hers through the kneading process. She learned to brew coffee the way he liked it, strong enough to wake the dead. They worked in companionable silence, speaking only when words were necessary. But the silence wasn't empty. It was full of things neither of them knew how to say. Piers. 3 weeks after the shooting, the nightmares started. Josephine woke screaming, Vernon's face hovering over her, his gun pointed at her chest. She gasped for air, her hands clutching at the wound that was slowly healing. Hey, you're all right. Ethan was there, kneeling beside the bed. You're safe. It was just a dream. But it wasn't just a dream. It was memory. It was truth. It was the moment her husband decided she was worth less than a bullet. He's going to find me, she sobbed. He's going to come back and finish what he started. No, he won't. Ethan's voice was firm. I won't let him. You don't know what he's like. I don't care what he's like. Ethan took her hand, and his grip was strong, solid. You're under my protection now. Anyone who wants to hurt you has to go through me first. Josephine looked at him through her tears. Why do you care so much? Ethan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion he usually kept buried. Because I know what it's like to lose someone, and I'm not going to stand by and watch someone die when I can prevent it. Who did you lose? My wife, Caroline. Fever took her 3 years ago. He looked away, his jaw tight. I couldn't save her, but I could save you. Understanding dawned slowly. Ethan wasn't just helping a stranger. He was trying to make amends with a ghost. I'm not her, Josephine said softly. I know that. I can't replace what you lost. I'm not asking you to. Ethan met her eyes. I'm just asking you to let me help. The next morning, Sheriff Dalton arrived at the ranch. Josephine was in the kitchen when she heard the hoofbeats. Fear shot through her like another bullet. Vernon. He'd found her. Stay inside, Ethan said, reaching for his rifle by the door. But it wasn't Vernon. It was the law. Ethan Yates. The sheriff dismounted, tipping his hat. Sheriff Tom Dalton from Silver Reef. Got a minute? What's this about? Looking for information about a woman named Josephine Blackwell. Her husband filed a report 3 weeks back, said she wandered off during the blizzard. Haven't heard from her since. Josephine's blood ran cold. Vernon had reported her missing. He was covering his tracks, making sure no one would look for him if her body was ever found. "Why are you asking me?" Ethan's voice was carefully neutral. "You were out in that storm. Thought maybe you saw something." Before Ethan could answer, Josephine stepped out of the kitchen. "I'm Josephine Blackwell." The sheriff's eyes widened. "Ma'am, your husband's been worried sick. My husband shot me and left me to die in the snow." Her voice shook, but she forced the words out. "Ethan Yates saved my life." Sheriff Dalton's expression shifted from surprise to something harder. "That's a serious accusation, Mrs. Blackwell." "It's the truth." "You have proof." Josephine pulled aside the collar of her dress, revealing the bandages over her wound. "Is this proof enough?" The sheriff dismounted fully, now his hand resting on his gun. "Where's Vernon Blackwell now?" "I don't know," Josephine said. "He left me in the snow and rode off. Probably thought the storm would cover his crime," Ethan added. "Probably thought no one would ever find her." Sheriff Dalton looked between them, calculating. "This is a serious matter. I'll need to investigate. Mrs. Blackwell, you'll need to come to town, give a formal statement." "She's not going anywhere until she's fully healed," Ethan said. "Ethan, I need her statement while it's fresh. And I need her alive. Look at her. She can barely stand for more than a few minutes. You want her statement? You can take it here." The sheriff studied Josephine, taking in her pale face, the way she leaned against the doorframe for support. "All right, I'll take her statement here. But I'll be back to check on the investigation." After the sheriff left with Josephine's statement, the cabin felt different. Heavier. The outside world had crashed back in, bringing all the complications Josephine had been trying to forget. "What happens now?" she asked. Ethan was standing by the window watching the sheriff ride away. "Now we wait. Dalton's a good man. If Vernon can be found, he'll find him. And if he can't, then you're still safe here." Josephine moved to stand beside him. Outside, the snow was finally starting to melt, revealing patches of brown earth. Spring was coming, whether she was ready for it or not. "I'm still legally married to him," she said quietly. "Even if they arrest him, even if he goes to prison, I'm still his wife." "Not if you don't want to be." "It's not that simple." "Isn't it?" Ethan turned to face her. "He tried to kill you. That breaks any vow I know of." "The law doesn't see it that way." "Then the law is wrong." Such simple certainty, such unwavering conviction. Josephine almost believed him. "What if he comes here?" she asked. "What if he finds out I'm alive? Then he'll have to deal with me. I don't want you getting hurt because of me." Ethan reached out his hand, gentle on her shoulder. "Josephine, look at me." She did. His eyes were steady, determined. "I made a choice when I pulled you out of that snow. I chose to help you, to protect you. That doesn't change just because things got complicated." "Why?" The question came out as a whisper. "Why do you care so much about someone you barely know?" Ethan's hand dropped away, but he didn't step back. "Because when Caroline died, I was too late. I couldn't save her. I couldn't stop the fever, couldn't do anything but watch her slip away." His voice roughened. "I swore I'd never feel that helpless again. And then Drummer led me to you in that storm, and I thought maybe this is my chance. Maybe I can save someone this time." "I'm not a second chance," Josephine said. "I'm not a way to ease your guilt." "I know that." He met her eyes. "But maybe we can help each other. You need protection. I need—" He paused, searching for the right words. "I need to remember what it feels like to matter to someone again." The honesty in his voice broke something open in Josephine's chest. This wasn't pity. This wasn't duty. This was a man as lost and broken as she was, reaching out in the only way he knew how. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted. "I don't know how to trust anyone again." "Then we'll figure it out together." Spring came slowly to the Utah Territory, melting the snow one grudging inch at a time. As the land thawed, so did something in Josephine. She grew stronger, moved easier. The wound in her chest healed to an angry scar, but the wounds in her heart took longer. Ethan never pushed. He gave her space when she needed it, company when she wanted it. They fell into a routine morning coffee together, chores divided evenly, evenings by the fire where they talked about small things, safe things. But underneath the ordinary moments, something deeper was growing. Something neither of them was quite ready to name. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Ethan asked, "What made you marry him?" Josephine had known the question would come eventually. She set down her mending. "I was 17. Vernon was handsome, charming. He said all the right things." She smiled bitterly. "I thought he loved me." "When did that change?" "The day after the wedding." The memories came flooding back, sharp and painful. "He stopped pretending, started drinking, started spending money we didn't have. When I objected, he—" She stopped, the words sticking in her throat. "He hit you." Ethan finished, his voice flat. Josephine nodded. "At first I told myself it was my fault, that I'd provoked him somehow, that if I could just be better, quieter, more obedient, he'd love me the way I needed him to. It was never your fault. I know that now, but back then—" She shook her head. "Back then, I believed every cruel word he said. I believed I was worthless, troublesome, more burden than blessing. You're none of those things. How can you be sure? You've only known me a few weeks." Ethan leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "I know you get up every morning even when the pain is bad. I know you insist on pulling your weight even when I tell you to rest. I know you have nightmares that wake you screaming, but you get up the next day and keep going." He met her eyes. "That's not weakness, Josephine. That's strength." She felt tears building, but refused to let them fall. "Sometimes I wish he'd killed me. At least then it would be over." "Don't say that." "Why not? It's true. Because you're worth more than that." Ethan's voice was fierce now. "You're worth more than a bullet in the snow. You're worth more than being someone's punching bag. And one day, you're going to believe that." "You sound very certain." "I am." "How?" "Because I see you, Josephine. The real you, not the broken thing Vernon tried to make you believe you were. And that woman is strong and brave and deserving of so much more than she got." The tears fell then, hot and fast. Ethan moved to sit beside her on the bench, and when she leaned into him, he wrapped his arm around her shoulders and let her cry. They sat like that until the fire burned low and the moon rose high outside the window. The next morning, everything changed again. Sheriff Dalton returned, his face grim. "Vernon Blackwell fled to Colorado. I've got a warrant out for his arrest, but he's crossed into another territory. It'll take time to bring him back." "How much time?" Ethan asked. "Could be months, could be years. Men like him know how to disappear." Josephine felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Vernon was out there free while she was trapped in this limbo. Not quite his wife, not quite free, not quite anything. "What am I supposed to do?" she asked. "You've got options," the sheriff said. "You can stay here, lie low until we find him. Or you can go back to town, stay with family if you have any." "I don't have family." Vernon made sure of that. She'd lost touch with her parents years ago, ashamed of what her marriage had become. "And I won't go back to town. Everyone there thinks I abandoned my husband." "Then you stay here," Ethan said, "as long as you want." Sheriff Dalton looked between them, his expression unreadable. "People will talk, you know. A married woman living alone with an unmarried man." "Let them talk," Ethan said flatly. "Josephine's safety matters more than gossip." After the sheriff left, Josephine turned to Ethan. "You don't have to do this. I can find somewhere else to go." "Where?" "I don't know. Somewhere." "That's not a plan, Josephine. That's running." "Maybe running is the only option I have left." Ethan caught her arm gently. You have another option. You stay here. You heal. You build a life that's yours, not his. How I'm still his wife. I'm still trapped. Not if we get you free. His eyes were serious. There are lawyers in Salt Lake City, men who specialize in difficult cases. We could pursue a legal separation, maybe even a divorce. On what grounds? Attempted murder seems like pretty solid grounds to me. Hope sparked in Josephine's chest, dangerous and bright. That would take money. Lawyers aren't cheap. I've got some saved. I can't ask you to do that. You're not asking. I'm offering. Ethan's grip on her arm tightened slightly. I want you to be free, Josephine. Really free. Not just physically, but legally. So you can decide what kind of life you want without Vernon's shadow hanging over you. Why? The question came out broken. Why do you care so much? Because you deserve better than this. His voice dropped lower, more intimate. Because I care about you. More than I should probably, but I do. The words hung between them, heavy with unspoken possibility. Josephine's heart hammered against her ribs, and for the first time since Vernon's bullet tore through her chest, she felt truly alive. I care about you too, she whispered. Ethan's hand moved from her arm to her face, his thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. Then stay. We'll figure out the rest together. And in that moment, standing in the cabin where he'd saved her life, Josephine made her choice. She wasn't running anymore. She was staying. That decision changed everything, and yet nothing changed at all. Josephine still woke in Ethan's cabin each morning, still helped with chores, still shared coffee by the fire. But now there was something unspoken between them, something that made every accidental touch feel electric, every shared glance weighted with possibility. 3 days after she'd decided to stay, Ethan rode to Salt Lake City to find a lawyer. Josephine spent those 3 days alone at the ranch, and the silence was both terrifying and liberating. For the first time in 5 years, she was truly by herself, no husband controlling her movements, no voice telling her she was worthless. Just her and the land and the horses and the wind through the canyon. She cleaned the cabin thoroughly, not because Ethan expected it, but because she wanted to. She baked bread that actually turned out edible. She even tried her hand at mending one of Ethan's shirts, though her stitches were crooked and uneven. When he returned on the third evening, she was standing at the stove stirring a pot of stew that smelled better than anything she'd made in weeks. "You're back," she said, relief flooding through her. Ethan set down his saddlebag, his face drawn with exhaustion. "I am." "Did you find someone?" "I did. Lawyer named Harrison Wells. He's handled separation cases before." Ethan moved to the table, pulling papers from his bag. "He says we have a strong case. Attempted murder, abandonment, cruelty, but it's going to take time." "How much time?" 6 months minimum. Maybe longer if Vernon contests it. Josephine's hand trembled on the spoon. 6 months. Half a year of waiting, of being trapped in legal limbo. What if he finds me before then? He won't. Ethan's voice was firm. Wells is filing the paperwork under a different jurisdiction. Vernon won't even know you're pursuing it until the notice is served. And when he gets that notice, then he'll have a choice: show up to court and face attempted murder charges, or stay hidden and let the separation go through uncontested. It made sense logically, but fear was never logical. "He'll come for me," Josephine said. "I know him. He won't let me go that easily. Then I'll be ready for him." Josephine turned from the stove to face him fully. "You keep saying that, like you're willing to die for someone you barely know." "I know you well enough." Ethan crossed the small room in 3 strides. "And I'm not planning on dying. I'm planning on keeping you safe." "Why?" The question burst out of her, desperate and raw. "Why does it matter so much to you?" Ethan was quiet for a long moment, his eyes searching her face. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion he usually kept buried. "Because when I pulled you out of that snow, you looked at me like I was something more than just the broken man who couldn't save his wife. You looked at me like I mattered." You do matter. Not to anyone. Not for 3 years. His jaw tightened. And then there you were, bleeding and freezing. And for the first time since Caroline died, I had a purpose again. Someone who needed me. Is that all I am to you? A purpose? No. The word came out harsh, certain. You're so much more than that. But I don't know how to say it without sounding like a fool. Josephine's breath caught. Try. Ethan's hand came up hesitant and touched her face with a gentleness that made her want to weep. You make me remember what it feels like to hope, to want something beyond just surviving each day. Before she could respond, before she could sort through the tangle of emotions his words unleashed, a knock sounded at the door. They both froze. Expecting anyone? Josephine whispered. No. Ethan moved to the door, his hand on the rifle he kept nearby. Who is it? Mrs. Adelaide Morrison from Silver Reef. I need to speak with Mrs. Blackwell. Josephine's stomach dropped. Adelaide Morrison was one of Vernon's mother's closest friends, a woman who'd never liked Josephine, who'd made it clear she thought Vernon had married beneath him. What do you want? Ethan called through the door. I want to speak with Josephine. Alone. That's not happening, Ethan said. Mr. Yates, I'm not here to cause trouble. I have information Mrs. Blackwell needs to hear. Josephine moved to Ethan's side. Let her in. Josephine. I can handle Adelaide Morrison. Ethan opened the door slowly. Adelaide stood on the porch, wrapped in furs, her face pinched with cold and something harder. She looked past Ethan directly to Josephine. So it's true, Adelaide said. You're alive. Vernon said you'd died in the blizzard. Vernon shot me and left me to die, Josephine said flatly. There's a difference. Adelaide's eyes narrowed. That's a very serious accusation. It's the truth. Ask Sheriff Dalton if you don't believe me. I spoke with the sheriff. He said you're pursuing legal action against your husband. Adelaide stepped inside, uninvited, her gaze sweeping the cabin with obvious disdain. Living here with a man who's not your husband. Do you have any idea what people are saying? I don't care what people are saying. You should care. You're still Vernon's wife. Still bound by vows you took before God. Vows he broke when he put a bullet in my chest, Josephine shot back. Or do attempted murder and abandonment not count in your version of holy matrimony? Adelaide's face flushed. Vernon told me what really happened. He said you attacked him, that he was defending himself. Josephine laughed, the sound bitter and sharp. Of course he did. And you believed him. I believe the man I've known for 20 years over a woman living in sin with a stranger. Get out, Ethan said, his voice dangerously quiet. Adelaide ignored him, her attention fixed on Josephine. Vernon's mother is dying. She's asking for you. The words hit Josephine like a physical blow. Vernon's mother, Martha, had been one of the few people who'd shown her any kindness during her marriage. Stern and proper, but never cruel. How long does she have? Josephine asked. Days, maybe. The doctor says her heart is failing. Adelaide's expression softened slightly. She wants to see you one last time, to make her peace. This is a trap, Ethan said immediately. It's not a trap. Martha Blackwell is dying. That's all. And Vernon, Josephine asked. Where is he? Colorado, last anyone heard. He won't be there. Ethan turned to Josephine. You're not going. She was kind to me. She didn't deserve a son like Vernon, and she doesn't deserve to die without saying goodbye. It's too dangerous. I'll have the sheriff escort me, Josephine said. And you can come too if it makes you feel better. Damn right I'm coming. Adelaide's lips pressed into a thin line. Very well. But Martha's house is in town. If you cause a scene... I'm not the one who causes scenes, Josephine said coldly. That would be your friend's son, the one who shoots his wife and leaves her to freeze to death. They rode into Silver Reef the next morning, Ethan at her side, and Sheriff Dalton leading the way. The town looked smaller than Josephine remembered, dirtier, meaner. People stopped to stare as they passed, whispers following in their wake. "They think I ran away," Josephine said quietly. "They think I abandoned Vernon." "Let them think what they want," Ethan replied. "You know the truth." Martha Blackwell's house sat at the edge of town, a small clapboard structure that had seen better days. Adelaide met them at the door, her expression sour. "Martha's in the back bedroom. She's very weak, so keep your visit short." Josephine nodded and started toward the bedroom, but Adelaide caught her arm. "If you upset her." "I won't." Josephine pulled free and continued down the narrow hallway. The bedroom was dim curtains drawn against the morning sun. Martha lay in the bed, her face pale and sunken, her breathing labored. She looked 100 years old, though Josephine knew she couldn't be more than 60. "Martha." Josephine approached the bed slowly. "It's Josephine." Martha's eyes fluttered open. "Josie, you came." "Of course I came." "I heard what happened, what Vernon did." Martha's hand reached out, trembling. "I'm so sorry, child, so sorry." Josephine took her hand, feeling the bones beneath paper-thin skin. "It's not your fault. I raised him. I must have done something wrong." "You did everything you could. Vernon made his own choices." Martha's eyes filled with tears. "He was such a sweet boy. I don't know when he changed." "Some people are just broken," Josephine said softly. "No amount of love can fix that." "Are you all right? Adelaide said you were shot." "I'm healing. A man named Ethan Yates saved my life." Martha squeezed her hand weakly. "Good. That's good." She paused, gathering strength. "I changed my will. Left everything to you instead of Vernon." Josephine's breath caught. "Martha, you don't have to. It's done. This house, what little money I have, it's yours. Vernon doesn't deserve a single penny after what he did." Martha coughed a wet, rattling sound. "Promise me you'll use it to start over, to build a good life." "I promise." "And this man who saved you, do you love him?" The question caught Josephine off guard. I don't know. Maybe. It's too soon to tell. Life's too short for maybe's child. If he makes you happy, hold on to him." Martha's eyes closed. "Lord knows happiness is rare enough." They sat in silence for a few minutes, Martha's breathing growing more labored. Then Adelaide appeared in the doorway. "She needs to rest." Josephine leaned down and kissed Martha's forehead. "Thank you. For everything." Martha's eyes opened one last time. "Be happy, Josie. That's all I ever wanted for you." Martha died 2 days later. Josephine didn't attend the funeral. Adelaide made it clear she wasn't welcome, but the news hit harder than expected. Martha had been one of the few bright spots in a dark marriage, and now she was gone. The inheritance came through within the week. The house, $800 in savings, and a small plot of land on the outskirts of town. It wasn't a fortune, but it was more money than Josephine had ever had in her life. "You could start over," Ethan said when she told him. "Buy your own place. Be independent." They were sitting by the fire, the papers spread out on the table between them. Josephine looked at them, then at Ethan. "Is that what you want? For me to leave?" "No." The word came out fast, emphatic. "But I want you to have choices, real choices." "I already made my choice. I'm staying here." "Josephine." "Unless you want me to go. If you're tired of having me here, just say so." Ethan stood abruptly, pacing to the window. "I'm not tired of having you here. That's the problem." "What's the problem?" He turned to face her, his expression raw. "The problem is that every day you stay, I care about you more. And every day I care about you more, I think about things I have no right to think about." Josephine's heart hammered. "What kind of things?" Things like what it would be like to wake up next to you every morning, to build a life with you, not just survive alongside you, to... He stopped, running a hand through his hair. You're still married, Josephine. Legally, you belong to another man, and wanting you the way I do feels wrong. Vernon broke every vow between us when he pulled that trigger. The law doesn't see it that way. And until Wells gets that separation finalized, you're still his wife. Josephine stood, moving toward him. I don't feel like his wife. I haven't felt like his wife since the day he first hit me. She stopped, inches from him. When I'm with you, I feel like myself, like the person I was supposed to be before Vernon crushed every good thing inside me. Josephine. Her name came out rough, desperate. Tell me you don't feel it too, this thing between us. Of course I feel it, but feeling it and acting on it are two different things. Why? Because of some piece of paper that says I belong to a man who tried to murder me. Because I want to do this right. Ethan's hands came up to her shoulders. When I finally get to hold you, when I finally get to kiss you, I want there to be no shadows between us. No legal complications, no lingering ties to Vernon. Just you and me, free and clear. The words were almost unbearable in their sweetness. How much longer do we have to wait? Wells says 4 more months if everything goes smoothly. 4 months is a lifetime. I know, but it'll be worth it, I promise. Josephine leaned her forehead against his chest, feeling his heart beat steady and strong beneath her cheek. I'm going to hold you to that promise. His arms came around her, then holding her close but carefully, like something precious that might break. They stood like that until the fire burned low and the stars came out, neither wanting to be the first to let go. But peace never lasted long. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived. The envelope was addressed to Josephine, in handwriting she recognized immediately Vernon's. Her hands shook as she opened it. Ethan stood beside her, reading over her shoulder. My dearest wife. The letter began, and Josephine's stomach turned at the endearment. I've heard you're pursuing a legal separation. This saddens me deeply. Whatever misunderstandings occurred between us can surely be resolved without involving the courts. I'm prepared to forgive your indiscretions. Your living arrangements with Mr. Yates have not escaped my notice, if you'll withdraw the petition and return home where you belong. If you refuse, I'll have no choice but to defend my rights as your husband. And I assure you I have resources you cannot imagine. Think carefully about your next move. Your loving husband, Vernon. The threat was clear, even through the civilized language. Vernon knew where she was, Vernon knew about Ethan, and Vernon was planning something. He's going to fight the separation, Josephine said, her voice hollow. Let him fight. Wells says we have an airtight case. You don't understand. Vernon doesn't fight fair. He never has. She looked up at Ethan, fear sharp in her chest. He's going to come after you. After the ranch. He'll find a way to destroy everything. Then we'll be ready for him. But how could they be ready for a man who had no limits, no conscience, no mercy? Vernon had tried to kill her once. What would stop him from trying again? The answer, Josephine realized with growing dread, was nothing. Nothing would stop Vernon except death, his or theirs. We need to leave, she said suddenly. Pack up. Go somewhere he can't find us. Running won't solve anything. Neither will staying here and waiting for him to strike. Ethan took her shoulders, forcing her to meet his eyes. I'm not running. This is my land, my home, and you're under my protection. Vernon Blackwell can bring an army if he wants. He's not getting to you. You're being stubborn. I'm being practical. Running means giving up everything, the ranch, the legal case, our lives here. And for what? So Vernon can chase us from town to town for the rest of our lives. He shook his head. No. We stand our ground. We fight this the right way. And if the right way gets you killed, then at least I'll die knowing I didn't run from a coward. Josephine wanted to scream, to shake him, to make him understand the danger he was in. But she could see the determination in his eyes, the same stubborn strength that had kept him going after Caroline's death. Ethan Yates didn't run. It wasn't in his nature. "I can't lose you," she whispered. "Not when I just found you." His expression softened. "You won't lose me. I promise." But promises Josephine had learned were easy to make and hard to keep, and Vernon Blackwell had a talent for breaking things, vows, bones, hearts. What made them think they could stand against that blank? The answer came 3 days later in the form of a visitor, a well-dressed man with a leather satchel and calculating eyes, who introduced himself as Leonard Pritchard, attorney at law. "I represent Vernon Blackwell," he said, standing on the porch with the confidence of a man who'd never been told no. "I'm here to negotiate a settlement." "There's nothing to negotiate," Ethan said. "I think Mrs. Blackwell should be the judge of that." Pritchard looked past Ethan to where Josephine stood in the doorway. "Your husband is prepared to offer you a generous settlement, $2,000, and your freedom if you'll withdraw the criminal charges." $2,000. More money than Josephine had ever imagined having. Enough to start over somewhere new, somewhere Vernon could never find her. "And if I refuse?" she asked. "Then Mr. Blackwell will be forced to defend himself in court. And I assure you, our defense will be vigorous. We'll call character witnesses. We'll question your living arrangements with Mr. Yates. We'll make sure every sordid detail of this situation becomes public record." Pritchard smiled coldly. "By the time we're done, your reputation will be in tatters. No respectable person will have anything to do with you." "My reputation is already in tatters," Josephine said. "Vernon made sure of that when he shot me." "Allegedly shot you. Mr. Blackwell maintains his innocence. He can maintain whatever he wants. I have a scar that says otherwise." Pritchard opened his satchel and pulled out papers. "This is a settlement agreement. Sign it, and you walk away with $2,000 and your freedom. Refuse, and we go to court. Your choice." Ethan moved between them. "She's not signing anything." "Mr. Yates, this doesn't concern you." "Like hell it doesn't. You're threatening a woman who was nearly murdered." "I'm offering her a way out of a complicated situation." Pritchard's smile widened. "But perhaps you have other reasons for wanting this to go to trial. Perhaps you're hoping to gain control of any settlement money Mrs. Blackwell receives." "Get off my property." "Not until Mrs. Blackwell makes her decision." Josephine looked at the papers, then at Pritchard, then at Ethan. $2,000. Her freedom. No trial, no public humiliation, no more looking over her shoulder. But it would mean Vernon won. It would mean he got away with attempted murder. It would mean every woman after her who suffered at his hands would have no recourse, no justice, no hope. "No," she said. Pritchard raised an eyebrow. "I'm sorry." "I said no. I'm not signing your papers. I'm not letting Vernon buy his way out of what he did. You're making a mistake. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make." Pritchard's expression hardened. "You'll regret this. When we drag every detail of your life through the mud, when we destroy what's left of your reputation, when we make sure no one in this territory will have anything to do with you, you'll wish you'd taken the money." "Then I'll have regrets to keep me company," Josephine said. "Now get out before I have the sheriff remove you." Pritchard left, but his threat hung in the air like smoke. Vernon wasn't giving up. He was just getting started. That night, as Josephine lay in bed, she heard Ethan moving around the cabin, checking locks, loading his rifle, setting up watch. Preparing for war. And war, she knew, was exactly what Vernon Blackwell would bring. If you or someone you know is having a difficult time, free support is available. War came slowly at first, then all at once. The first strike happened 3 nights after Pritchard's visit. Ethan woke to the smell of smoke and found his barn door smashed open. 2 of his horses missing, and a message carved into the wood with a knife. Last chance. Josephine stood beside him in the pre-dawn darkness, staring at the damage. He wants me to know he can reach me whenever he wants. He's trying to scare you into taking the settlement. It's working. Ethan turned to her. You want to take the money. I want this to be over. Her voice cracked. I want to stop waiting for the next attack, the next threat. I'm tired of being afraid. Then we end it. We go to Sheriff Dalton, show him this, add property destruction to the charges against Vernon. And then what? Vernon sends someone else to break something else. Josephine wrapped her arms around herself. He's not going to stop until I give him what he wants. Which is what? Your silence, your submission. Ethan's jaw tightened. I won't let you sacrifice yourself to a coward. This isn't about you. The hell it isn't. He's destroying my property, threatening my life, trying to drive you away from the only safe place you have. That makes it about me. Before Josephine could respond, hoofbeats sounded in the distance. They both tensed, but it was Sheriff Dalton riding hard toward the ranch. Ethan, Josephine. The sheriff dismounted quickly. You need to hear this. Vernon's lawyer just filed a countersuit. He's claiming Josephine orchestrated her own shooting as part of a plan to defraud Vernon of his inheritance from his mother. Josephine felt the ground shift beneath her feet. That's insane. Insane or not, he's got witnesses. Adelaide Morrison is testifying that you and Ethan knew each other before the shooting, that this whole thing was planned. That's a lie, Ethan said flatly. I know it's a lie, but Pritchard's good at his job. He's already got half the town believing Josephine's playing the victim to get out of her marriage and steal Martha's inheritance. The inheritance Martha left me in her will, Josephine said. Not something I stole. Try explaining that to people who already think the worst of you. Dalton looked between them. I'm on your side here, but you need to understand what you're up against. Pritchard's building a narrative that makes Vernon the victim and you the villain. Then we tear that narrative apart, Ethan said. We prove Josephine nearly died. We prove Vernon's a liar. With what evidence? The bullet wound healed. There's no body, no crime scene, nothing but Josephine's word against Vernon's. Dalton's expression was grim. And a married woman living alone with another man doesn't exactly inspire trust in a jury. Josephine's hands clenched into fists. So I'm supposed to just give up? Let Vernon win because people would rather believe a lie than face the truth? I'm saying you need to be smart about this. Pritchard's going to tear you apart on the stand. Your reputation, your character, every decision you've made since leaving Vernon, it's all going to be used against you. Let him try. Josephine's voice hardened. I'm not the same woman Vernon left to die in the snow. I'm not afraid anymore. But she was afraid. Terrified, actually. Just better at hiding it now. The countersuit changed everything. Suddenly, Josephine wasn't the victim seeking justice. She was the defendant fighting accusations of fraud and conspiracy. The trial date was set for 6 weeks out, and Harrison Wells, their lawyer, made the long trip from Salt Lake City to prepare their defense. Wells was a thin, bookish man, with sharp eyes and sharper questions. He sat in Ethan's cabin, papers spread across the table, firing inquiries at Josephine like bullets. Did you know Ethan Yates before the shooting? No. Had you ever visited his ranch? No. Had you ever expressed dissatisfaction with your marriage to anyone in Silver Reef? Josephine hesitated. Yes. Wells leaned forward. To whom? Martha, Vernon's mother. I told her he was drinking too much, spending too much, that he'd become cruel. Did you tell her he hit you? No. Why not? Because I was ashamed. Because I thought it was my fault. Wells made a note. Pritchard's going to argue you were building a case for abandoning Vernon long before the shooting, that you confided in his mother to turn her against him to secure her inheritance. That's not what happened. Can you prove it? Josephine looked at Ethan, then back at Wells. Can you prove it didn't? That's not how this works. The burden of proof is on them to show fraud, but they're very good at creating reasonable doubt. Wells tapped his pencil against the table. I need you to tell me everything. Every conversation with Martha, every moment that could be twisted against you. The interrogation lasted 3 hours. By the end, Josephine felt wrung out, exposed, like Wells had peeled back her skin and examined every raw nerve beneath. After Wells left, she sat by the fire staring into the flames. "He doesn't believe me," she said quietly. Ethan looked up from where he was cleaning his rifle. "What? Wells? He doesn't believe my story. He's just being thorough." "No, he's preparing to defend someone he thinks might be guilty." Josephine's voice was hollow. "Even my own lawyer doesn't trust me." Ethan set down the rifle and moved to sit beside her. "Wells's job is to find the weaknesses in our case before Pritchard does. That doesn't mean he doesn't believe you." "Then why did every question feel like an accusation?" "Because you're used to being accused. Vernon spent 5 years making you doubt yourself. Now you see doubt everywhere, even when it's not there." Josephine wanted to believe him, but doubt was a hard habit to break. The next blow came from an unexpected direction. Josephine went to town for supplies, accompanied by Ethan, despite her protests that she could manage alone. The general store owner, Mr. Henshaw, had always been polite, if not warm. But when Josephine walked through the door, his expression turned cold. "We don't serve your kind here," he said. Josephine stopped. "Excuse me." "You heard me. I don't do business with thieves and liars." "I haven't stolen anything." "Maybe not money. But you stole Martha Blackwell's affection, turned her against her own son. That's theft in my book." Heat flooded Josephine's face. "Martha made her own choices. Because you manipulated her. Because you played the victim when the truth is, you're the one causing trouble." Henshaw pointed to the door. "Get out, and don't come back." Ethan stepped forward. "Now wait just a... You two Yates, harboring an adulteress under your roof, destroying a man's marriage. You should be ashamed." "The only person who should be ashamed is Vernon Blackwell for trying to murder his wife." Ethan said, his voice dangerously quiet. "That's not what I heard. I heard she shot herself to frame him." "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Get out of my store. Both of you." They left, but the damage was done. As they walked back to the wagon, Josephine saw people watching from doorways, whispering behind hands. The looks they gave her weren't sympathetic, they were hostile. "Vernon's poisoned the whole town against me," she said. "Then we don't need the town. We need supplies. We need witnesses for the trial. We need..." She stopped, overwhelmed. "We need people to believe me, and nobody does." Ethan took her hand. "I believe you. That's enough." But it wasn't enough. Not when the entire town had already decided she was guilty. That night, Josephine couldn't sleep. She lay in bed listening to Ethan move around the cabin and thought about running. She had Martha's money. She could leave tonight, disappear into Colorado or California, or somewhere Vernon could never find her. But running meant abandoning Ethan. It meant Vernon won. It meant every time she looked over her shoulder for the rest of her life, she'd see his shadow. She got up and found Ethan sitting by the fire, a letter in his hands. "What's that?" she asked. He looked up, surprised. "Couldn't sleep." "Answer the question." Ethan held out the letter. "It came this afternoon, from a woman named Sarah Crenshaw in Denver." Josephine took the letter, scanning the contents. Her breath caught. Vernon was married before. And Sarah's his first wife. She's willing to testify. What happened to her? Same thing that happened to you. He beat her, isolated her from her family. When she finally tried to leave, he threatened to kill her. She ran to Denver, changed her name, spent years looking over her shoulder. Ethan's expression was hard. "She heard about your case through a newspaper article. She wants to help." Hope flickered in Josephine's chest, fragile and dangerous. "Will her testimony be allowed?" "Wells says it establishes a pattern of abuse. It corroborates your story." He paused. "But it also means dragging another woman through hell. Sarah would have to come to Utah, face Vernon in court, relive her own trauma." "I can't ask her to do that." "You're not asking. She's offering. Josephine read the letter again this time, seeing the strength in Sarah's words. I survived him, Sarah had written. But I only survived because I ran. You're standing and fighting. Let me stand with you. I want to meet her, Josephine said. Before the trial. I want to thank her. Wells is arranging it. She'll be here next week. Next week. 7 days to prepare for facing the woman who'd lived through her same nightmare and somehow came out the other side intact. What if I can't do this? Josephine whispered. What if I get on that stand and fall apart? Ethan stood crossing to her. Then you fall apart. And then you get up and keep fighting. You make it sound so simple. It's not simple. It's the hardest thing you'll ever do. But you're strong enough. I know you are. How can you be so sure? Because you're still here. After everything Vernon did, everything he took from you, you're still standing. That's not weakness, Josephine. That's strength. She wanted to believe him. Wanted to trust that she was strong enough, brave enough, angry enough to see this through. But doubt kept whispering in her ear, wearing Vernon's voice. Sarah Crenshaw arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, stepping off the stagecoach in a plain gray dress, her face lined with a life's worth of hard lessons. She was older than Josephine by maybe 10 years, with dark hair streaked with silver, and eyes that held both kindness and wariness. Josephine met her at the hotel, Ethan waiting outside to give them privacy. Mrs. Blackwell, Sarah said, extending her hand. Josephine, please. They sat in Sarah's room, tea growing cold between them as they talked. Sarah's story was painfully familiar, the charming courtship, the slow escalation of control, the first hit that she'd convinced herself was an accident. I stayed for 3 years, Sarah said. Kept thinking if I could just be better, quieter, more obedient, he'd love me the way he promised. She laughed bitterly. Took me almost dying to realize he was never capable of love. How did you get away? I didn't, not really. I just ran far enough that he couldn't find me. Sarah's hands twisted in her lap. I changed my name, dyed my hair, took whatever work I could find. Spent 10 years looking over my shoulder. Do you still? Every day, some fears never leave you. Josephine understood that fear lived with it in her bones. Then why come back? Why testify? Sarah met her eyes. Because I read about your case in the newspaper. Read that you were fighting him in court instead of running. And I thought maybe if I'd had someone to stand with me, maybe I would have been brave enough to fight too. She reached across and took Josephine's hand. I can't change my past, but maybe I can help change your future. Tears burned in Josephine's eyes. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Pritchard's going to tear me apart on that stand. He'll call me a liar, a scorned woman, anything to discredit my testimony. Let him try. Sarah smiled, and for the first time Josephine saw steel beneath the kindness. That's the spirit. But Vernon wasn't done with his attacks. 2 days before the trial, Josephine woke to find Ethan's cattle scattered across 3 counties, his fences cut, and another message carved into his barn door. You're next. This time the threat was clear. Vernon wasn't just trying to scare them anymore. He was escalating toward violence. Sheriff Dalton organized a search for Vernon, but the man was a ghost. Nobody had seen him. Nobody knew where he was hiding, and every day brought new evidence of his presence, a broken window, a slaughtered chicken, small cruelties designed to unnerve. He's playing with us, Ethan said, checking his rifle for the 3rd time that day. Building up to something bigger. The trial, Josephine said. He's going to do something at the trial. Dalton will have deputies there. Vernon would be a fool to show his face. When has that ever stopped him? Ethan had no answer for that. The night before the trial, neither of them slept. They sat by the fire, not touching, but close enough to feel each other's presence, and waited for dawn. Whatever happens tomorrow, Josephine said, I want you to know something. Don't talk like you're saying goodbye. I'm not. I'm just—" She struggled for words. "You saved my life. Not just in the snow, but every day after. You gave me a reason to keep fighting when I wanted to give up." "You did that yourself." "No, we did it together." She finally looked at him. "And whatever the jury decides, whatever happens in that courtroom, I want you to know that these past months have been the happiest of my life." Ethan's hand found hers in the darkness. "They've been mine, too." They sat like that until the sun rose, holding hands, gathering strength for the battle ahead. The courtroom was packed, every seat filled with curious townsfolk eager to witness the spectacle of Josephine Blackwell's trial. She sat beside Harrison Wells at the defendant's table, trying not to look at the crowd, trying not to see the hostile faces staring back at her. Vernon sat across the aisle with Leonard Pritchard, looking respectable in a new suit, his face arranged in an expression of wounded dignity. When Josephine's eyes met his, he smiled. That smile said everything. He thought he'd already won. Judge Morrison, no relation to Adelaide, but cut from the same cloth, called the court to order. Pritchard stood to make his opening statement. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, his voice smooth as oil. "This is not a tale of abuse and survival. This is a tale of greed, manipulation, and fraud. The prosecution would have you believe that Vernon Blackwell, a respected member of this community, attempted to murder his wife in cold blood. But the evidence will show something very different. The evidence will show that Josephine Blackwell, with the help of her lover, Ethan Yates, orchestrated her own shooting to frame her husband and steal his inheritance." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Josephine felt sick. Pritchard continued laying out his case with devastating precision. The inheritance, the timing, Josephine's living arrangements with Ethan. Every fact twisted into something ugly. When he finished, Wells stood for his opening statement. "What you're about to hear," Wells said quietly, "is the story of a woman who survived the unsurvivable, who was shot by her husband and left to freeze to death, yet somehow found the strength to live, to heal, to fight for justice." He looked at the jury. "Vernon Blackwell wants you to believe his wife is a villain, but the real villain is the man who put a bullet in her chest because she was, in his words, more trouble than she was worth." The trial had begun, and Josephine had never been more afraid in her life. Pritchard called his first witness within minutes. Adelaide Morrison, dressed in her finest black dress, her expression pious and certain. "Mrs. Morrison, how long have you known the Blackwell family?" 23 years. I was Martha Blackwell's closest friend." "And during that time did you observe the marriage between Vernon and Josephine Blackwell?" "I did. Vernon was a devoted husband, worked hard, provided well, but Josephine was never satisfied." Wells stood. "Objection? Speculation." "Sustained," Judge Morrison said, though his tone suggested he didn't much care. Pritchard continued smoothly. "Let me rephrase. Did Josephine ever complain about her marriage to you?" "Constantly. Said Vernon didn't give her enough attention, didn't buy her nice things, always wanting more than she deserved." Josephine's hands clenched in her lap. Every word was a lie, but Adelaide delivered them with such conviction that even Josephine almost believed her. "Did you ever witness Vernon strike his wife?" "Never. He was gentle as a lamb." "And when did you first learn about Josephine's relationship with Ethan Yates?" Adelaide's eyes gleamed. "About 3 months before the alleged shooting. I saw them together in town talking in a way that seemed improper. Too familiar." "That's not true," Josephine whispered to Wells. "I know. Let her talk. We'll tear it apart on cross-examination." But watching Adelaide spin her lies, Josephine wondered if truth even mattered anymore. Pritchard thanked Adelaide and sat down. Wells stood for cross-examination, his voice calm but sharp. "Mrs. Morrison, you said you were Martha Blackwell's closest friend, correct?" "Yes." "Then you must have been aware that Martha changed her will shortly before her death, leaving everything to Josephine instead of Vernon." Adelaide's expression faltered. Martha wasn't in her right mind at the end. Is that your medical opinion? It's common sense. Why else would she cut out her own son? Perhaps because she knew what kind of man he was. Wells pulled out a document. This is Martha Blackwell's diary submitted as evidence. In it she writes, and I quote, "Adelaide refuses to see Vernon's cruelty. She defends him because she cannot admit she was wrong about him." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Adelaide's face flushed crimson. Martha was confused, Adelaide insisted. Sick. She didn't know what she was writing. Yet she was lucid enough to work with her lawyer to change her will, lucid enough to specifically request that Josephine be present at her deathbed. Wells leaned forward. "You weren't invited to that meeting, were you, Mrs. Morrison?" Martha was too ill for visitors. Yet Josephine was allowed in. Why do you think that is? Because Josephine manipulated her way in like she manipulates everyone. Wells smiled thinly. Or perhaps because Martha trusted Josephine and didn't trust you. No further questions. Adelaide left the stand, her confidence shaken. But the damage was done. The jury had heard her testimony, and some of them were nodding along. Pritchard called more witnesses shopkeepers, who said Josephine seemed unhappy neighbors, who claimed they'd seen her talking to Ethan before the shooting. Each testimony added another brick to the wall of lies surrounding her. By noon, Josephine felt buried under the weight of it all. During the recess, Wells pulled her and Ethan aside. "This afternoon we put you on the stand." Josephine's stomach dropped. "Already? We need to establish your credibility before Pritchard destroys it completely. You tell your story the truth exactly as it happened. Don't let him rattle you." "What if I can't do it? What if I break down?" Wells met her eyes. "Then you break down. But you tell the truth anyway. The jury needs to see you're human, not the monster Pritchard's painting you as." That afternoon, Josephine took the stand. The oath felt heavy in her mouth, the truth, the whole truth, as if truth was something solid and provable, instead of a story no one wanted to believe. Wells began gently. "Mrs. Blackwell, please tell the court about your marriage to Vernon Blackwell." Josephine took a breath. "It started well enough. Vernon was charming when we courted, but after the wedding things changed." "How so?" "He became controlling, wanted to know where I was every moment, who I talked to, what I spent money on." Her voice steadied as she spoke. "The first time he hit me was 2 months after we married. I'd bought fabric for a dress without asking permission. He said I was wasteful, worthless. Then he backhanded me across the face. Did you tell anyone?" "No, I was ashamed. I thought it was my fault." "When did it happen again?" "A week later, then more frequently. Sometimes for reason I could understand I'd burned dinner or spoken out of turn. Sometimes for no reason at all except that he'd been drinking and I was there." She told it all, 5 years of systematic cruelty, each incident building on the last, until she barely recognized herself anymore. The courtroom was silent, hanging on every word. "And the day of the shooting," Wells said. "Tell us what happened." Josephine's hands trembled. "Vernon was drunk. He'd lost money gambling and he blamed me for it. Said if I wasn't such a burden he'd have money to spare. I told him he needed to stop drinking, stop gambling, that we couldn't afford his habits." She swallowed hard. "That's when he pulled the gun." "What did he say?" "He said I was more trouble than I was worth. Then he shot me." "And after?" "He left me in the snow. Rode away while I was bleeding, dying. The last thing I heard was his horse's hoofbeats fading into the storm." "How did you survive?" "I don't remember much. Just cold and pain, and thinking this was how I'd die alone in the snow, killed by the man who promised to love me." She looked at Ethan. "Then Ethan found me, saved my life." "Had you ever met Ethan Yates before that night?" "Never." "Did you orchestrate your own shooting?" "No." "Did you ever conspire with Ethan to defraud your husband?" "No, I just wanted to live." Wells nodded. No further questions. Pritchard stood and Josephine braced herself. "Mrs. Blackwell, you paint quite the picture of yourself as a victim. But isn't it true you were unhappy in your marriage from the start? I was unhappy because Vernon abused me. Or were you unhappy because you married a man who couldn't give you the life you wanted? A man who worked hard but couldn't afford your expensive tastes. I never had expensive tastes. Vernon was the one who gambled away our money. According to you. But Vernon's financial records show he was quite responsible with money until you began pressuring him for things he couldn't afford. That's not true. Pritchard pulled out papers. Bank statements showing regular withdrawals for fabric, jewelry, household goods, all purchased by you. Fabric for dresses because my old ones were falling apart. Household goods because we needed them to survive. Or because you wanted to live beyond your means. Pritchard circled closer. Isn't it true that when Martha Blackwell became ill, you saw an opportunity, a way to escape your marriage and secure a comfortable future? No. Isn't it true that you befriended Martha specifically to turn her against Vernon? Martha was kind to me, that's all. Kind enough to leave you her entire estate. Convenient, wouldn't you say? Martha left me her estate because she knew what kind of man Vernon was. She told me so on her deathbed. How convenient that the only witness to that conversation is dead. Pritchard's smile was cold. Tell me, Mrs. Blackwell, where exactly did the bullet enter your body? Josephine touched her chest. Here, below my collarbone. And it went clean through. Yes. Amazing that you survived such a wound. That you were able to walk, talk, function within weeks. I nearly died. Ethan nursed me back to health. Or perhaps the wound was never as serious as you claim. Perhaps you arranged for a minor injury that would support your story without actually endangering your life. That's insane. Is it? You're asking this court to believe your husband shot you in a vital area, left you in a blizzard, yet somehow you survived without medical attention beyond what a rancher could provide. That's quite miraculous. Ethan saved my life, Josephine said, her voice rising. If he hadn't found me when he did, I would be dead. Or if he hadn't been conveniently nearby waiting for your signal to begin this elaborate fraud. Wells stood. Objection, counsel is testifying. Sustained, Mr. Pritchard, stick to questions. But Pritchard had made his point. The jury looked skeptical, uncertain. Josephine felt the case slipping away like sand through her fingers. When Josephine left the stand, her legs barely held her. Ethan caught her arm, steadying her. You did good, he whispered. I failed. They don't believe me. The trial's not over. But it felt over. It felt like Vernon had already won. Wells called Sarah Crenshaw next. The courtroom watched as she took the stand, this stranger from Denver with her careful posture and haunted eyes. Mrs. Crenshaw, please state your relationship to Vernon Blackwell. Sarah's voice was steady. I was his first wife. The courtroom erupted. Judge Morrison banged his gavel. Order? Pritchard shot to his feet. Objection. This witness has no bearing on the current case. Your Honor? Wells said. Mrs. Crenshaw's testimony establishes a pattern of behavior directly relevant to the charges against Mr. Blackwell. Judge Morrison considered, then nodded. I'll allow it, but keep it relevant, Mr. Wells. Wells turned back to Sarah. How long were you married to Vernon Blackwell? 3 years, from 1877 to 1880. And why did the marriage end? Because he tried to kill me. Another eruption of whispers. Vernon's face had gone white. Sarah continued, her voice never wavering. It started the same way Josephine described. Charm during courtship, control after marriage. The first hit came a month in. By the end of the first year, I was afraid to breathe wrong. Did you report his abuse? No, I was ashamed. I thought it was my fault. What changed? He came home drunk one night and held a knife to my throat. Said if I ever tried to leave him, he'd kill me. Sarah's hands clutched the rail. I waited until he passed out, then I ran. Changed my name, moved to Denver. Spent 10 years looking over my shoulder, waiting for him to find me. Did he ever try to find you? For the first year. Then I heard he'd remarried. Sarah looked at Josephine. I'm sorry I didn't come forward sooner. I was too afraid. Why come forward now? Because I read about Josephine's case. Because I realized if I'd been brave enough to fight him, then maybe she wouldn't have had to suffer the same way. I can't change my past, but maybe I can help change her future. Pritchard's cross-examination was brutal. He attacked Sarah's credibility, her motivations, her convenient timing. But Sarah held firm, refusing to be shaken. You changed your name, Pritchard said. Ran away. If Vernon was truly so terrible, why didn't you go to the police? Because men like Vernon don't face consequences. They charm their way out of trouble, while their victims are blamed for provoking them. Or perhaps because you knew your accusations were false. My accusations are true, and Josephine's scars prove Vernon hasn't changed. When Sarah left the stand, something had shifted in the courtroom. The jury looked uncertain. Vernon looked furious. Wells called Ethan next. He took the stand with quiet confidence, his presence solid and reassuring. Mr. Yates, tell the court how you found Josephine Blackwell. I was riding home through the blizzard when my horse Drummer started acting strange. He led me off the main path to where Josephine was lying in the snow. She was unconscious, bleeding heavily from a gunshot wound. If I'd been 5 minutes later, she would have died. Had you ever met Mrs. Blackwell before that night? Never. Did you have any relationship with her prior to the rescue? None. I didn't even know her name until she woke up 2 days later. Why did you take her in? Because she was dying and I could help. That's all. Pritchard's cross-examination tried to suggest Ethan and Josephine had been secret lovers, that the rescue was staged. But Ethan's straightforward honesty made the accusations sound absurd. Mr. Yates, isn't it true you've developed romantic feelings for Mrs. Blackwell? Yes. The admission sent ripples through the courtroom. Josephine's breath caught. So you admit you have a vested interest in her being free of her marriage? I have a vested interest in her being alive and safe. Whether she stays married or not is her choice, not mine. Yet you're harboring another man's wife under your roof, living in sin. I'm protecting a woman who was nearly murdered. If that's sin, I'll answer for it. How convenient that protecting her also serves your romantic interests. Ethan leaned forward. You want to know what's convenient? Vernon Blackwell shooting his wife and expecting her to die quietly in the snow. What's convenient is him filing a countersuit to avoid facing justice for attempted murder. What's convenient is lawyers like you twisting the truth to protect cowards and abusers. His voice hardened. I may have romantic feelings for Josephine, but that doesn't change the fact that Vernon Blackwell is a would-be killer who belongs in prison. The courtroom fell silent. Even Pritchard seemed momentarily at a loss for words. The prosecution rested. Pritchard called Vernon to the stand. Vernon walked up with his wounded dignity intact, his expression that of a man wrongly accused. He placed his hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth, and Josephine wanted to laugh at the obscenity of it. Mr. Blackwell, Pritchard began, tell the court what happened the day your wife disappeared. We'd had an argument, a small disagreement about money. Josephine stormed out into the blizzard before I could stop her. Vernon's voice broke convincingly. I went after her, but the storm was too strong. I searched for hours calling her name, but there was no trace. I thought she'd died in the cold. You thought she was dead? Yes, I mourned her, buried an empty coffin in the cemetery. He looked at Josephine with manufactured sadness. Imagine my shock when I learned she was alive, living with another man. Did you shoot your wife? Never. I loved Josephine. I still love her despite everything. Why do you think she's making these accusations? I believe she's been manipulated by Ethan Yates. He rescued her, made her dependent on him, turned her against me. And now they're trying to steal my mother's inheritance. It was a masterful performance. Vernon looked wounded, dignified, sincere. The jury was eating it up. Wells stood for cross-examination, and Josephine held her breath. "Mr. Blackwell, you testified that you and your wife had a small disagreement about money. Can you be more specific? Just normal marital disagreement, nothing serious. Nothing serious enough to make her run out into a deadly blizzard." Josephine was always dramatic, emotional. "I see. And when you searched for her, where exactly did you look?" "Everywhere. The roads, the fields, the town." "Did you check the area where she was eventually found?" Vernon hesitated. "I don't know exactly where she was found. About 6 miles west of Silver Reef on Ethan Yates's property." "Did you search there?" "I searched in every direction." Wells pulled out a map. "This is your property. This is the Yates Ranch. To get from your property to his, you have to pass through this canyon. Did you search this canyon?" "I don't remember. The storm was disorienting." "Yet you remember searching everywhere else." Wells moved closer. "Isn't it true you didn't search that area because you knew exactly where she was because you left her there?" "No." "Mr. Blackwell, you testified you loved your wife, yet you remarried less than 6 months after you thought she died. Doesn't that seem rather quick for a grieving husband?" Vernon's composure cracked slightly. "I was lonely. I needed companionship." "Or perhaps you weren't grieving at all because you knew Josephine was alive. You just hoped she'd stay hidden." "That's not true." "No." "Then explain this." Wells held up another document. "A telegram sent from you to a colleague in Colorado 3 weeks after the alleged disappearance. You wrote, and I quote, 'The problem has been handled. She won't be causing trouble anymore.'" The courtroom exploded. Vernon's face went white, then red. "That telegram was about a business matter." Vernon stammered. "Not about Josephine." "What business matter?" "I don't recall specifically." "How convenient." Wells's voice was steel now. "You don't recall specifically, yet you recall every detail of searching for your wife in a blizzard." "The truth is, Mr. Blackwell, you shot your wife and left her to die. You sent that telegram believing she was dead. And when you learned she'd survived, you concocted this entire fraud narrative to avoid facing justice for attempted murder." "That's a lie." "Is it? Then why did you flee to Colorado immediately after Sheriff Dalton began investigating?" "I didn't flee. I had business there. Business that prevented you from cooperating with the investigation into your wife's disappearance." Vernon had no answer. His facade was crumbling, and everyone could see it. Wells pressed harder. "You were married once before, weren't you?" "Objection!" Pritchard shouted. "Irrelevant. Overruled." Judge Morrison said, leaning forward with interest. "Yes," Vernon admitted. "I was married before." "And what happened to that marriage?" "My first wife left me, abandoned our vows." "Or did she run for her life just like Josephine tried to do?" "She was unstable, dramatic." "Funny how both your wives ended up being dramatic. Or maybe the problem isn't them, Mr. Blackwell. Maybe the problem is you." Vernon stood suddenly. "I've had enough of this mockery." "Sit down, Mr. Blackwell," Judge Morrison ordered. But Vernon was unraveling. "You want the truth? Fine. Josephine was ungrateful, wasteful, impossible to please. I worked myself to the bone while she complained about everything. She drove me to—" He stopped, realizing his mistake. "Drove you to what?" Wells asked softly. "To shoot her." "No, I didn't. I wouldn't." "But you just admitted she drove you to something. What was it, Mr. Blackwell? What did your ungrateful wife drive you to do?" Vernon's silence spoke louder than any confession. Wells turned to the jury. "No further questions." Chund. The closing arguments came next. Pritchard tried to salvage his case, but his words rang hollow against Vernon's near confession. Wells kept it simple, direct, pointing to the evidence, the testimonies, Vernon's own words. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. When they returned, Josephine couldn't breathe. "On the charge of attempted murder," the foreman said, We find the defendant Vernon Blackwell guilty." The courtroom erupted. Vernon lunged toward Josephine, screaming obscenities, but Sheriff Dalton and his deputies restrained him. "You'll pay for this!" Vernon shouted as they dragged him away. "You'll both pay!" But his threats were empty now. He was going to prison. And Josephine was finally truly free. She turned to Ethan, tears streaming down her face, and found him already reaching for her. They held each other while the courtroom buzzed around them, holding on like they might never let go. "It's over," she whispered. "It's over," he confirmed. And for the first time in 5 years, Josephine Blackwell could breathe. But freedom wasn't as simple as a verdict. The days after the trial felt strange, untethered. Josephine woke each morning expecting Vernon's shadow to darken the doorway, his threats to shatter the silence. But he was gone, locked in a cell awaiting sentencing, and the absence felt almost as heavy as his presence had been. "You're safe now," Ethan said one morning, watching her stare out the window for the 100th time. "He can't touch you anymore." "I know that. In my head I know that." Josephine turned to face him. "But my body doesn't believe it yet. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop." "There's no other shoe. The trial's over. Vernon's guilty. All that's left is the sentencing." The sentencing came 2 weeks later, 20 years in the territorial prison for attempted murder. Vernon stood when the judge pronounced the sentence, his face contorted with rage. "This isn't over," he shouted as the deputies led him away. "You hear me, Josephine? This isn't over." But it was over. The doors closed behind him, and Josephine felt something inside her chest finally unclench. Not completely, the scars ran too deep for that, but enough. Enough to breathe, enough to imagine a future that didn't include looking over her shoulder. Harrison Wells met them outside the courthouse. "The divorce petition is next. With Vernon's conviction, it should be straightforward. 6 to 8 weeks for the decree." "That fast?" Josephine asked. "That fast. The court doesn't look kindly on attempted murderers maintaining marital rights." Wells shook their hands. "You did good in there, both of you." After he left, Ethan turned to Josephine. 6 to 8 weeks. Then you're really free." "Then we're both free," she corrected. They rode back to the ranch in comfortable silence, the weight of the trial finally lifting. But as they approached the property, Josephine saw something that made her pull up short. A dozen people stood in front of the cabin, neighbors, townspeople, even a few of the jury members. Her first instinct was fear, but then she saw the baskets they carried, the tentative smiles on their faces. "What's this?" she asked as they dismounted. An older woman stepped forward, Mrs. Henderson, who ran the bakery. "We wanted to apologize for not believing you, for making you feel unwelcome." She held out a basket. "It's not much, just some bread and preserves, but we wanted you to know that Silver Reef isn't all like Adelaide Morrison." Josephine took the basket, overwhelmed. "You don't have to apologize." "We do. We let Vernon charm us into thinking you were the villain. We should have known better." Mrs. Henderson's eyes were kind. "You're welcome in our town, Mrs. Blackwell. Both of you." One by one, the others came forward with their offerings, food, fabric, even a hand-stitched quilt from the church ladies. Not everyone in Silver Reef had turned against her. Some had just been waiting for the truth to come out. After they left, Josephine stood in the cabin, surrounded by their gifts, and for the first time since Vernon shot her, she felt like she belonged somewhere. "People surprise you sometimes," Ethan said, helping her unpack the baskets. "They do." Josephine pulled out a jar of honey, turning it in the light. "I spent so long thinking everyone hated me. But maybe some of them were just scared. Of Vernon, of going against the majority. Does that make it easier to forgive them? I don't know, but it makes it easier to stay." The divorce decree came through exactly 6 weeks later. Harrison Wells brought the papers himself, riding all the way from Salt Lake City to deliver them personally. "You're officially Josephine Blackwell again," he said, handing her the document. "Unmarried, unencumbered, free to do whatever you choose." Josephine stared at her name on the paper, Her name not Vernon's wife, just hers. Thank you for everything. You did the hard part. I just handled the paperwork. Wells tipped his hat to Ethan. Mr. Yates, pleasure working with you. After Wells left, Josephine sat at the table, the decree spread out before her. Legally, she was no longer tied to Vernon. The marriage that had nearly destroyed her was erased as if it had never existed. How does it feel? Ethan asked. Strange. Like I should feel different, but I'm still just me. She looked up at him. Is that normal? I don't know. I've never been divorced. But you've lost someone. Caroline, did you feel different after she died? Ethan was quiet for a long moment. I felt like half of me was missing, like I'd never be whole again. He moved to sit across from her. But then I met you and I realized I was wrong. I wasn't half a person. I was just a person who'd experienced loss. And loss doesn't make you less, it just makes you different. Is that your way of saying I'm whole? I'm saying you've always been whole. Vernon tried to break you, tried to make you believe you were nothing without him. But you survived. You fought. You won. He reached across the table, taking her hand. You're the strongest person I've ever met. Tears pricked at Josephine's eyes. I don't feel strong. Strength isn't about feeling invincible. It's about being terrified and doing it anyway. You walked into that courtroom knowing Pritchard would tear you apart, and you told your truth anyway. That's strength. I had help. You, Sarah Wells, the sheriff. Having help does not make you weak. It makes you smart. Ethan's grip tightened on her hand. You want to know what I've learned these past months? That survival isn't a solitary act. We survive together, or we don't survive at all. With the divorce finalized, Josephine had to make decisions about her future. Martha's inheritance still sat in the bank, the house in town, the money, the small plot of land. She could sell it all, use the proceeds to start fresh somewhere new. Or she could keep it, build something here in Silver Reef. What do you want to do? Ethan asked one evening as they discussed options. I want to turn Martha's house into something useful. A place where women can go when they need help getting away from situations like mine. Josephine's voice grew stronger as she spoke. A refuge. Somewhere they can stay while they figure out their next steps. That's a good idea, a needed idea. I'd need help running it, and funding beyond what Martha left me. The church might contribute. Some of the wealthier ranchers. People who saw what happened and want to do something useful about it. Josephine nodded slowly. I'd want Sarah involved too. She knows what these women are going through better than anyone. You've really thought this through. I've had a lot of time to think. About everything Vernon took from me, and everything I can do now that he's gone. She met Ethan's eyes. I can't change what happened to me, but maybe I can help it not happen to someone else. Within a week, Josephine had spoken with the church elders, several prominent ranchers, and even Judge Morrison, who'd shown surprising support for the idea. Funding came together faster than expected. Martha's house would become the Blackwell Refuge, named after the woman who'd shown Josephine kindness when she needed it most. Sarah agreed to help run it, moving from Denver to Silver Reef. Together they cleaned out the house, repaired what needed fixing, and prepared for their first resident, a young woman whose husband's drinking had turned violent. You're doing something important here, Sarah said as they hung curtains in one of the bedrooms, giving women a choice they didn't have before. We're doing it, Josephine corrected. I couldn't do this without you. Maybe that's the point. We survived alone, but we're stronger together. The refuge opened on a cool autumn morning. No fanfare, no grand announcement, just a sign on the door. Safe haven, all welcome. The first woman arrived that afternoon, then another the following week. By the end of the month, the refuge housed 4 women, all of them rebuilding their lives one day at a time. Josephine split her time between the refuge and Ethan's ranch, never quite sure where she belonged. Part of her wanted to be at the refuge every moment, helping protecting. But part of her needed the ranch, needed the quiet mornings with Ethan, needed the space to heal her own wounds. "You're allowed to have both," Ethan said one evening when she voiced her confusion. "You're allowed to help others and still take care of yourself." "It feels selfish." "It's not selfish. It's necessary." He pulled her close. "You can't pour from an empty cup, Josephine, and you've been running on fumes for a long time." Winter came early that year, bringing with it the first anniversary of the night Ethan pulled Josephine from the snow. They stood together in the exact spot where he'd found her, the ground now covered in fresh powder. "I was dead here," Josephine said quietly. "Not just dying, dead. Every part of me that mattered was gone. But you weren't dead. You were fighting to live. Because you fought for me." She turned to face him. "I never thanked you properly, for saving my life." "You don't need to thank me." "Yes, I do. You could have ridden past, could have decided it wasn't your problem. But you didn't. You saw someone in trouble, and you helped, no questions asked." She took his hands. "You gave me a second chance at life, and I don't take that lightly." Ethan was quiet for a moment, his eyes searching hers. "Can I tell you something I've never told anyone? Anything. When Caroline died, I prayed. First time I'd prayed since I was a boy. I asked God to give me another chance to save someone I loved, to not fail again." His voice roughened. "Then 6 months later, Drummer led me to you in the snow, and I thought maybe God actually listened. Do you believe that you were meant to find me? I don't know what I believe about fate or divine intervention, but I know finding you changed everything for me. I stopped just surviving and started living again." Josephine leaned into him, feeling his warmth against the cold. "I love you. I should have said it before now, but I love you." "I love you too. Have since the moment you woke up and tried to apologize for being a burden. I was a burden. You were never a burden. You were a gift." Ethan pulled back just enough to look at her face. "Marry me." The words hung in the cold air between them. Josephine's breath caught. "What?" "Marry me. Not because you need protection or a place to stay. Not because I saved your life or because it's expected. Marry me because I love you, and you love me, and I want to spend whatever time we have left building a life together." "Ethan, I know it's soon. I know you just got out of one marriage. I know there's 100 reasons to say no." He squeezed her hands. "But I also know that life's too short to waste time pretending we don't want this. I want you. I want mornings drinking coffee together. I want evenings by the fire. I want arguments about stupid things and laughter about nothing. I want all of it with you." Josephine's eyes filled with tears. "I'm broken. Vernon broke parts of me I don't know if I can ever fix." "Then we'll be broken together. I've got my own damaged pieces. We can figure it out as we go." "What if I can't be the wife you deserve?" "You're exactly the wife I deserve. Stubborn, brave, impossible to frighten. Perfect." A laugh escaped through her tears. "I'm not perfect. Neither am I. But we're perfect for each other." Josephine looked at this man who'd saved her life in every way that mattered, who'd stood beside her through the trial, believed her when no one else did, loved her when she couldn't love herself, who was offering her not just survival, but a future. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'll marry you." Ethan kissed her, then soft and gentle, a promise of all the kisses to come. When they pulled apart, both were crying, both were smiling, both were whole in a way neither had been in years. They married in the spring when the snow finally melted and the first wildflowers pushed through the thawing earth. No big ceremony, no elaborate affair. Just them, Sheriff Dalton as witness, and Sarah standing beside Josephine like the sister she'd never had. The vows were simple: to love, to honor, to stand together through whatever came next. No promises about perfect partnership or eternal happiness. Just honest commitment to face life together, broken pieces and all. After the ceremony, they held a small celebration at the ranch. The townspeople came, the ones who'd believed Josephine, and even some who hadn't, but wanted to make amends. Mrs. Henderson brought her famous apple pie. The church ladies brought enough food to feed twice the crowd. Even Judge Morrison showed up with a bottle of good whiskey and congratulations. As the sun set and the guests began leaving, Josephine stood on the porch with Ethan's arm around her waist, watching the last wagon disappear down the road. "We did it," she said. "We did. I'm Josephine Yates now. Feels strange. You can keep Blackwell if you want, or go back to your maiden name. You're not property anymore. You get to choose." "I choose Yates." She leaned into him. "I choose you. Every day, for the rest of my life." The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm that felt both new and ancient. Morning coffee together, discussing the day's tasks. Josephine splitting time between the ranch and the refuge. Ethan teaching her to ride better, to shoot straight, to mend fences and manage cattle. Long evenings by the fire talking about everything and nothing. The refuge grew. More women came, stayed healed, moved on to build their own lives. Sarah became not just Josephine's partner in running it, but her dearest friend. They understood each other in ways no one else could, the weight of survival, the burden of memories that never quite faded. One afternoon, as Josephine was helping a new arrival settle into her room, the woman asked a question that stopped her cold. "Does it get easier? The nightmares, the fear, the feeling like he might come back any moment?" Josephine thought about lying, about offering false comfort. But these women deserved truth, not platitudes. "It gets different," she said honestly. "The nightmares come less often. The fear becomes manageable instead of overwhelming. You stop looking over your shoulder every second." She sat down beside the woman. "But it never completely goes away. What happened to us, it changes us. We can heal, but we'll always carry the scars. Then what's the point, if we can never really be free? Because scars mean we survived. They're proof we're stronger than what tried to break us." Josephine took the woman's hand. "And because there's life on the other side of fear, real life, love, friendship, purpose, it's worth fighting for." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know if I'm strong enough." "You're here, aren't you? You walked through that door. You chose to fight for yourself. That's strength." Summer came hot and bright. The ranch thrived. The refuge helped more women than Josephine had dared hope. And slowly, so slowly, she almost didn't notice the nightmares faded. She still had them sometimes, Vernon's face looming over her, the gunshot echoing, but they no longer controlled her. One evening, as she and Ethan sat watching the sunset, he asked a question she'd been waiting for. "Do you ever regret it? Staying here building this life instead of running somewhere Vernon could never find you?" "Never." The answer came immediately, certainly. Running would have meant letting him win. Staying meant taking back everything he tried to steal from me. What if he gets out someday? 20 years isn't forever. Then I'll deal with it. We'll deal with it. She turned to face him. I'm not the woman he left to die anymore. I'm not weak or afraid or ashamed. I'm someone who survived, who built a life worth living. And if he ever comes back, he'll learn that the hard way. Ethan smiled. Remind me never to cross you. Smart man. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Somewhere in the house, dinner was waiting. Tomorrow, the refuge would need attention. Next week, cattle to move, fences to mend, endless tasks that made up a life. But right now, in this moment, Josephine was exactly where she belonged. I'm happy, she said, almost surprised by the realization. After everything that happened, after all the pain and fear and fighting, I'm actually happy. Good. You deserve to be. So do you. I am happy. Happier than I ever thought I'd be again. Ethan pulled her closer. You saved me too, you know. just in a different way. We saved each other. Yeah, we did. As darkness fell and the first stars appeared, they went inside together. To their home, their life, their future. The past would always be part of them. The scars, the memories, the lessons learned through pain. But the past didn't own them anymore. Josephine Yates was free. Not just legally, not just physically, but truly free. Free to love, to dream, to build something beautiful from the ashes of what had been destroyed. Free to be strong and soft broken, and whole, afraid and brave all at once. Vernon had tried to kill her in the snow that terrible night, but he'd failed. She survived. She thrived. She won. And that victory, that stubborn, hard-fought, beautiful victory, belonged to her and her alone. Vernon Blackwell had taken everything from her